Hello, my name is Ashley. In today's lesson, we will learn how to draw conclusions in a reading passage. More specifically, we will learn how to draw conclusions within the context of OSHA materials in the workplace. First, let's see if maybe you can relate to Fernando's situation. Fernando is an adult education student who is excited about the possibility of working in the warehouse at the AdultEdMed hospital. Unfortunately, he recently lost his job when the local poultry factory he worked for closed down. He was a forklift driver for 15 years, so he's now looking for a job working at the warehouse at the AdultEdMed hospital so that he can continue to support his family. He immigrated to the United States about 6 years ago and needs to pass the high school equivalency test. His biggest challenge, however, is with reading comprehension, an important skill to have to not only pass a test like the GED, but also to understand workplace safety guideline manuals and forms. In his previous job, he witnessed work-related injuries and wasn't entirely sure how to handle them. So, moving forward, Fernando would really benefit from understanding workplace safety guidelines so that he can make appropriate decisions. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to use workplace scenarios to draw conclusions by identifying text evidence to support your conclusions. You will also understand the definition of OSHA and its importance for both employers and employees. Once you practice, you will be able to apply the skill of drawing conclusions at work, during school, and in everyday life. Before we expand our discussion to job safety in the workplace, let's talk about drawing conclusions. What do we mean by drawing conclusions? Well, we draw conclusions every day about things we see, information we gather, or text we read. A conclusion is basically a decision or judgment we make based on the information we receive. So, we as readers draw conclusions based on the information the author gives us and on what we already know. For example, if you are reading a story and there is mention of a house where smoke is filtering out of the kitchen and the smoke alarm is going off, what conclusion would you draw? Well, there's probably a fire in the house, right? I'm able to draw this conclusion based on the evidence, which in this case is the smoke alarm and smoke, even though the author never explicitly states that there is a fire in the house. Much like solving a mystery, we put together all of the facts and what we already know to make a final decision. The more that you understand about the world around you, the easier it is to draw conclusions. Now let's take a minute to examine the OSHA fall prevention poster. Read all the text and be sure to look at the details on the poster from the top all the way to the bottom. What conclusions can be drawn from the message on the poster? In other words, based on the text from the poster, what is the man trying to warn fellow workers about? One conclusion we can draw when reading the message is that the man is trying to tell other workers that if they fall and injure themselves, they might hurt more than just their bodies. They might hurt their livelihood. This conclusion was drawn from the words on the very top of the poster that state, "I worked construction for 10 years before my fall. It shattered my body and my livelihood." So, even though he had over 10 years experience, he still had an accident that caused him such a bad injury that it affected his ability to work, his ability to make a living, and his ability to provide for himself and his family. Another conclusion we can draw from reading the man's message is that he's warning both employers and employees to be careful on the job, use the right equipment, and make sure to understand and follow the safety training. This conclusion came from the words at the bottom of the poster where it states, "Plan ahead to get the job done safely, provide the right equipment, and train everyone to use the equipment safely." In other words, learn from his mistakes and no matter how much experience you have, always follow safety guidelines. You may have noticed the acronym OSHA was written on the poster we just looked at. An acronym is a combination of letters that represent a word. In this case, OSHA stands for the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. OSHA is part of the federal agency, Department of Labor in Washington, D.C. This agency answers to the President of the United States. Keep in mind that OSHA is always involved in most of the jobs you have had in the past, have now, or dream of having in the future. The Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970 was passed to prevent workers from being killed or seriously harmed at work. This law created the federal agency Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA. which enforces protective workplace safety and health standards. The word enforce means if employers do not follow proper OSHA guidelines, they might receive an OSHA fine, which may cost the company a lot of money and time to fix the issues. OSHA also provides information, training, and assistance to employers and workers. Overall, under the OSHA Act, employers have the responsibility to provide a safe workplace. The federal agency OSHA makes sure this happens by monitoring workplace safety at American companies. Now, let's take a look at another poster titled OSHA Job Safety and Health, It's the Law, and see what conclusions we can draw based on the information provided. Please take a minute to pause the video, scan the poster details, and see if you can first identify the main points and then see what conclusions you can draw from those points. The main point of the bullets on the left-hand side of the poster is to explain workers' rights as defined by OSHA. For example, under the second bullet, it states, receive information and training on job hazards, including all hazardous substances in your workplace. Employees are within their rights to call, email, or talk to their supervisor and request proper personal safety equipment for a hazardous cleaning job. Now, let's look at the other side. What are the main points of the information included on the right-hand side column of the poster? Well, the main point is to explain the responsibilities and steps employers must take at the workplace to ensure employees are safe and healthy on a continual basis. Based on the main points on the right side, what does an employer need to do in the case of work-related, inpatient, hospitalization, amputation, or loss of an eye? Based on the information provided, we can draw the conclusion that the employer would need to contact OSHA within 24 hours, as it states in the third bullet point where it says, notify OSHA within 8 hours of a workplace fatality or within 24 hours of any work-related inpatient hospitalization, amputation, or loss of an eye. Now look at the fourth bullet point. What conclusions can you draw based on the information provided? It states, provide required training to all workers in a language and vocabulary they can understand. This means that we can draw the conclusion that an employer, such as the AdultEdMed hospital, must provide safety training classes in both English and Spanish if the business has Hispanic workers. If AdultEdMed hires and employs people who speak other languages, training materials and classes must be provided in those languages as well. Before we end this section, let's review a vocabulary word that was mentioned on the poster and that you might hear or read about in employee training classes or material. The word is retaliation. Take a minute and think about what the definition might be for this word. Have you heard it or seen it in materials at your job? Have you heard the word on TV or seen the word on a website or in a magazine or newspaper? Vocab.com defines the word retaliation as action taken in return for an injury or offense. We are working on drawing conclusions, so what conclusions can you draw about what employer retaliation might look like in the workplace? Here are some conclusions you might have drawn. Reduction in pay, termination, unfavorable shifts, such as the graveyard shift, withholding an employee from a raise, a negative performance review, and/or hostile treatment at work. Now let's practice together. Let's take a minute or so to read the OSHA workplace scenario number 2. Please pay close attention to the details of the employee incident. Where did the incident happen? When did the incident happen? What happened during the incident? And who was involved in the incident? The scenario involves an employee who slipped and fell on the sidewalk due to snow and ice. This employee suffered a back injury and missed multiple days of work. Based on what you read in scenario number 2 and what you learned from the OSHA It's the Law poster, do you think the incident is OSHA recordable? Meaning, do you think the incident must be reported to OSHA? When you answer, try to keep in mind that you should be able to explain why you chose that answer. In other words, Be ready to present evidence to support your claim. If you chose yes, you are correct. Based on the OSHA It's the Law poster, we know that employers are required to provide a safe working environment, free of hazardous conditions and/or materials. Therefore, steps should have been taken to make sure that sidewalks were clean of snow and ice or create a barrier around the sidewalks so people would know to avoid the area. Now that we know the incident described in scenario number 2 should have been reported to OSHA, let's answer 2 final questions. What conclusions can be drawn about OSHA's possible response to what happened in scenario number 2? And what evidence from the text supports your conclusions? Remember, HSE tests, like the GED test and other high school equivalency and college exams, will require you to draw conclusions and support your decisions based on facts and evidence from the text. It is entirely possible that an employee, such as Fernando, is reporting to work even before clocking in or entering the building for an accident to occur, such as slipping on the ice, tripping over an extension cord, or falling down a flight of stairs. Here are some conclusions that we should have been able to draw. OSHA will state that the employer is responsible for making sure the property outside the building is safe, even though the worker's injury did not occur inside the employer's building. Here are the details from the text that support this conclusion. The parking lot and sidewalks are privately owned by the facility and both are within the property line. OSHA's response was, company parking lots and sidewalks are part of the employer's establishment for record-keeping purposes, which supports our conclusion. Even though the employee slipped on the sidewalk outside the building, the employer is still responsible. OSHA will state that the employee's injury should have been reported as an incident to OSHA because the employee was on their way to work at the time of the accident. Here are the details from the text that support this conclusion. The employee drove into the company parking lot at 7:30 a.m. and parked the car. The employee exited the car and proceeded to the office to report to work. OSHA's response was, here, the employee slipped on an icy sidewalk while walking to the office to report for work. In addition, the event or exposure that occurred does not meet any of the work-related exceptions contained in 1904.5. The employee was on the sidewalk because of work, therefore the case is work-related regardless of the fact that he had not actually checked in, which supports our conclusion. The employer did not think they were responsible since the employee was not officially checked in and reported to work. This is false. Since the employee was en route to work, the employer is responsible. This concludes this section of the lesson on drawing conclusions within the context of OSHA safety materials. Now, please practice on your own and review the remaining OSHA workplace scenarios. You can practice your skills using the same format as this lesson. Read the scenario carefully, identify the important text evidence, and then draw conclusions about what OSHA's response will be. If you need to practice your writing skills, write down your response in paragraph form. You draw conclusions every day. Not only will this skill help you to pass your next HSE test, but it also helps you to make important decisions in life and in the workplace. The more you practice, the more your skills will improve and help you with current and future job opportunities. So keep practicing. I believe in you. Now it's important for you to believe in yourself. Good luck on both your academic and career journeys.